I think we're back again, and I have no idea how many times this is going to happen. So you know, yeah. So plan on things like that taking place from time to time. That the video will probably take a dive of some kind, and you know, but we're just gonna do what we do. And Anna says that the paper is dropping a little bit lower, so what I'll do is I'll kind of set things up so that most of the image is actually on the board and not you know, under the board or anything like that. Okay, so we should be good.
Yeah, that looks good.
All right, and we're missing about ½ inch on the bottom. I can live with that. All right, so what I'm going to do is just kind of start in with something, and I'm going to start things off with a color erase blue pencil. Actually, you know what? Hey, Michelle, do you have your Eno red? Ah.
So explain why you made the decision to switch from the blue to the red just now.
What I'm doing is I'm using, and this is something that we got from jetpens.com. It's the Pilot Eno. See if we can get a focus going on there.
A little bit. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So it's the Pilot Eno. You can get the pencil and the lead from JetPens. And this stuff, I mean, a lot of comic book artists and animators use the color erase pencil, which is made by Prismacolor, and it's a really good pencil. It's very erasable, and it comes in a bunch of different colors. So this is really good. But I find that these pencils are even more erasable than the color erase pencil, and they're really good to sort of set up a drawing. The only thing that you have to watch out for with these pencils is they are in no way, shape, and form light fast. So if you do a drawing with this, this is just to set up drawings. This is you cannot use this to do a finished drawing, because if it stays in sunlight for too long, it's just going to completely disappear. In fact, if it even stays under a 100-watt light bulb for too long, it'll completely disappear. So definitely don't use this as a finishing tool. Whereas the color erase pencils, you can use that. There's a number of people that do color erase techniques, and even if you get like old cell drawings, you can still see the color erase pencil still holding up pretty well. So it's definitely something to play around with if you want to use it for finished drawings. But what I'm going to do is just kind of set things up, and this is with these. I want these to kind of have a framework and then just sort of dissolve into looseness. So I'll just kind of start something a little bit on the looser side as far as the drawing is concerned, and then we'll just kind of build things from there.
So to recap for anybody that just joined us, what's happening is we're going to do a couple of headshots today, and we're going to be doing vampires, but different vampires from like different eras and different locations. So it's not your standard kind of Dracula kind of vampire.
I like the way you said that, Dracula.
So.
You know, I recently found out a friend of mine is related to what's his name, the actor who played the original
Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
Get out of town.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And this is kind of something that I've talked to a number of people about as far as like approaching a loose drawing. I try to do a combination of structure and things flowing from that structure. So my structure on this is pretty much going to be this sort of large rectangle here, and most of the actual superstructure or the tightness of the drawing is going to be right here on the face, and then I'm just going to fade out of that into this kind of looseness down here. So all of this stuff down here just really doesn't matter, but I think it's that combination of things being really, really nice and structured tight And let's see what that does. Hey, look at that. We're back in action.
Right.
Okay, so
and like Robert said, feel free to ask any questions. This technique is going to go all over the place. In fact, if Scott's here, this technique is very similar to the technique that I used to do the Talia Ghul that he has. That I did at the Heroes Convention.
okay, Louis said sounds back up, so we're good to go.
Very nice. And the cool thing about this is a lot of what I'm doing right now, this is kind of the just getting the drawing down, so I'm not afraid to put as much garbage on the page as possible. I'm just really kind of junking things up, and when I go in for the tighter drawing, that's when I'm gonna really start kind of editing things down. And this technique really depends on having like shadows. So I'm doing this in a way to really kind of set myself up. So, and I'm thinking of casting the shadows on her over this way, but also the shadows that a lot of the leaves are going to be cast are going to be sort of mapping across her face. So I want just that speckly quality of light and shadow on her face. Her face is I've kind of got an idea of where I want things to go with her face. But I've said this before at conventions, as I'm doing this this drawing, I don't have a perfect photograph of how things are supposed to look in my head. I kind of have a rough idea, but I generally tend to be only a few minutes in front of anyone who's watching this.
Okay, so because we lost the sound, why don't you tell them again about the color theory that you were going to do with it? Because you said the color theory is going to look a little messy.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna. This is going to be very messy. This is going to be like completely, covered in shadows. So, so I'm trying to get as much just stuff down here as possible. And this red pencil that I'm using is not. Most of this is not going to make it to the end of the piece. And now that I've kind of got the structure of it set up the way that I want, I can kind of see where I want this to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of slightly lighten things. And I want to be kind of careful about erasing things because I don't want to mess up the quality of the paper too much.
So Anna's already saying when the next vampire needs to be that male redhead. I think she's pulling for David to make an appearance here.
And now what I'm going to do is probably one of the scariest things of the day. With this technique, I think this technique works best if I use you can use Prismacolor pencils. I think Prismacolor pencils work really nicely, but I personally think the technique works better if you have a pencil that isn't like when you spray Prismacolor pencils, they get really glossy. The waxiness of the Prismacolor pencils really comes out. So I'm going to try to avoid using Prismacolor pencils, but what I'm going to use is I'm going to use flat out pastel pencils. And this is Faber-Castell Pit pastel pencils. They're kind of wooden with a little tip there. But I'm going to use that to kind of set up what would be my finished drawing. And like I said, I'm really kind of trying to get as much shadow work in here as possible. But at the same time, I don't want to be too afraid to go messy with this. And I want to keep this kind of not really super tight, but a little bit loose. Ultimately, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the reader to kind of provide some of the drawing for me. So when I'm done, you guys can sign part of it because you're going to be responsible for some of the work that I'm doing. And if I do this absolutely right, most of the work that I'm going to do, I'm going to be doing in the highlights, and I'm going to leave the shadows sort of to represent themselves as much as possible. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting out my basic shadows. And what I'll do is I'll kind of go in and kind of enhance the shadows of the leaves also. And at the same time, you'll kind of notice that I'm not only working on the tip of the pencil, but I'm also working on the side of the pencil. That way I can get both hard edges and soft edges.
Keep it an island sound.
Hmm?
I said I'm keeping an island sound.
Ah,
So I
very
move
nice.
so I can actually see whether or not it's goes out once again.
Well, this video thing seems like it reserves the right to disappear at a moment's notice. Yeah, the one of the things that I both like and don't like about this technique, I think it's kind of cool, is you have to be, you can't be very specific with your color, because this technique doesn't allow you to kind of be very distinctive with your color. Your color can be bright, but you're really using your color to kind of just wash through the illustration and not do very specific stuff.
Yeah, someone posted about like the how light the red lines are,
Uh-huh.
but they probably didn't hear because we were out. What Brian had said was the reason why the reds are so light is because they're not going to be there. So honestly, the purple lines that you're seeing go down are going to be what's going to be remaining in the piece.
Yeah, yeah. The red lines in this drawing, they're just going to completely disappear. In fact, one of the interesting things about the Pilot Eno pencil is that as you put washes on it, it actually is kind of dissolves a little bit in the water. So so it really kind of just melts the pencils away a little bit.
So Gambit has joined us.
What up, Gene?
Or if he has not joined us, he's at least posting. But he said we should do a Frank Langella Dracula. Need a disco drac. All right, Gambit, you're a man after my own heart. You can see where I'm going with this whole thing. So
Frank
that's pretty
Langella. Cool. Like Frank Langella and his dancing eyes.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, that Dracula movie was the first one I saw in the movie theater, and the only thing that creeped me out was when they looked out the window and he was crawling up the wall.
Dude, are you kidding me, man?
And then as a young lad, I was like, oh, that's scary. Well, that and the brides. The brides kind of freaked you out too.
Yeah. Yeah, but him crawling up that wall, man, that
Yeah.
was seriously creepy.
And of course, being a child of the '60s, Salem's Lot with the floating kid outside the window.
Oh man.
That one gave me nightmares for the longest time. My mom was so mad that we watched that. I don't know where she was that night, but somehow we managed to get the TV and we stayed up to watch that, and we got into so much trouble.
Yeah. And was it Starsky or Hutch that was in that?
David Soul, so he was the blonde guy.
Uh,
So that would be Hutch. No, that's Starsky, right? No, I don't know. No, that is Hutch.
and right now, what I'm doing is I'm establishing my patterns of the leaves that are on here. So these patterns are gonna kind of be bending around the contours of her face, but at the same time, I don't. And this is the tricky part: is I want it to obscure parts of her face, but I also want to, really see parts of her face. So I'm kind of using where these patterns fall to kind of enhance her expression, and but at the same time, kind of cloak her within these leaves. So I'm going to have all these like dark patterns back here, and these patterns are just going to be like organic patterns of light and dark. But the expression, like her mouth, I want to really kind of show like a lot of her mouth, and at the same time, I want to really kind of show off her eyes. I mean, this eye, a good part of this is going to be lost, but parts of this eye, I really wanted to kind of pop out of there and really kind of show off things. So I'm just kind of going through and figuring out, well, what parts of her face can I lose in the leaf pattern, and what parts of her face do I want to sort of stand out of the pattern. And then to add like another level of depth to it, I also want to have leaves in the foreground. So now that I know exactly where the leaves are going to be, I can be a little bit more specific about how I'm cutting the shadows on her face. And again, a lot of the work in the shadow is going to really remain in the shadow. I'm not gonna do a whole lot of work there.
All right, let me get a shot, and we'll post that up on Facebook so people can get a closer look at it.
And lots of things are going to get lost. I'm going to get myself nice and comfortable with the fact that some of this illustration is just not going to be there. And the absolute details of what's going to be happening with her hair, that's really not important. Right here, just these light areas in here, that's really the most important thing about this. And depending on the quality of how well or how badly things are pulling off of here, I might end up going back in with Prismacolor and bringing up some highlights and things like that. But right now, I really want to get that sense of her face. So this right here, the parts that you're seeing right now, this is the actual illustration. It's just right in here. All of this stuff up here, it's just really not important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of go in and sort of establish just some patterns of leaves in the background.
Okay, John Brooks just said, this live stream is awesome. Hope to see you this summer. I'm needing my art fix.
Oh, sweet. Well, catch me at a convention and we can share an art needle.
Yeah,
does, and Anna already told us that we can't get disgusting on here.
Okay. Anna warned us that YouTube is not quite as liberal as some of the streaming things, so we need to be careful and not curse and not get blue.
And anytime, like when I'm doing a finished illustration, when I'm doing something that's going to be like a cover or something like that, I'm going to put like a moderate amount of detail everywhere, and then I'm going to concentrate details on what I consider the subject of the piece. On this piece, because this isn't going to be specifically a tight illustration, this is going to be very loose. What I want to do is I want to think in terms of the path of detail. So the as far as the path of detail is concerned, excuse me, let me flip this over. What I'm thinking in terms of is this is my pattern. So I'm going to have like this. That's what you're going to see when you're kind of back away from the illustration and you see it sort of from a distance. It's just that pattern there. And in that pattern, let's say this is that pattern. Within that pattern, there's also going to be a path of detail. And for this, the path of detail is going to go through here. So I have a pattern, and then I have a pattern within the pattern. So that means out here, even though this is going to have color, it's going to have pigment on it, there's not going to be much detail. So I'm really going to obscure things here. Down here, I might have stuff going on, but I'm going to kind of really be loose on the details. And all the stuff down in here, I'm going to be loose on the details. But this path that goes right through her eyes, her nose, her lips, that's going to be where the detail is going to be. And this is kind of something that I refer to as having like some sort of pattern and then sort of dissipating away from that pattern. It's something that there's a guy, a fantastic illustrator, Tommy Arnold. I was talking to him over the Christmas break about what I call the Portuguese man of war, which is kind of Portuguese man of war. To me, it's like this shape, and then it's like this sort of pattern that drifts down, out of that shape. So that combination of shape and pattern, you can also think of it as, when something hits a wall and it makes like just a splatter, and then it kind of drips down. That's kind of a natural shape that we're kind of used to seeing. So I always try to go for something like that, thinking of where's my impact point, and then where do things just kind of bleed out of it. So that's what I'm trying to achieve here. These are the patterns that I'm trying to go for in this illustration. So it's kind of a combination of strength through here, a graceful path through here. Hopefully that's what we're going to get by the time we get to the end of this. And just knowing that, I'm going to really be very specific about making sure I have areas of nice dark patterns and areas of light patterns. So up here, I'm going to have actual leaves. So these leaves are sitting above the illustration. And then there's her beneath that. And I'm not going to really go for very much detail up here. Again, there's going to be a positive leaf here. I'm really kind of thinking in terms of how do those leaves fold. I've got this leaf kind of that's in the foreground, but it's casting a shadow on this leaf under it. I've got that strong leaf there. And like I said, I'm just really thinking in terms of those light and shadow patterns. And again, I need something here so that I really can show that kind of path of detail. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a leaf kind of sticking out there. again, a little something here so I can have a good path of detail and block this stuff in back here. It's really not that important. All right, so I can kind of see my patterns of light and dark on here. Kind of happy with the way things are kind of turning out. I think I'm gonna got some good shapes, so that's gonna work for me. I've got a good pattern that's flowing through here, so everything's totally cool on this so far. Now, at this point, what I can do is I can go in with actual paint and sort of establish my absolute darks, but like that's really not completely necessary at this point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of revisit those absolute darks once I get into sort of splashing color on this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab like a giant can of fixative.
Guest appearance by Robert's hand.
Yeah, my hands keep showing up, guys. All right, so posting images over on the Facebook page.
I'm leaving.
Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Krylon workable fixative, and Krylon workable fixative, the one, like most of the other fixatives are like much more subtle and better than Krylon workable fixative, but Krylon workable fixative is like, it's like a hammer. I mean, it's like the most brutal workable fixative that you can use. And for something like this, if I was doing this on something like gesso or something like that, I might want to use something a little bit more delicate than this. Or if I was doing it on like a really sweet piece of illustration board. But the paper that I'm working on here is this is Arch's text weight, I think Valen paper, but it's a really good sort of just text paper, but I think it's like a great rag drawing board paper. In fact, if you know those Renaissance sketchbooks, this is the paper that they use in the Renaissance sketchbooks. So this is really like just fantastic stuff. One of the things that I like about it is it pretty much takes on every medium that you can throw at it. I mean, you can do watercolors on this, you can do gouache on this, you can do acrylics on this. It's a beautiful texture for pencils and stuff like that. And also, it's a very durable paper, so you can just really scrub it to death, and it kind of holds its shape. It maintains itself. But one of the things that I also think is kind of tricky about it is it's not necessarily a good pen and ink kind of paper. So if you're planning on doing some pen and ink, you might want to kind of hold back on this. And for this, let's talk about color theory here before I jump in and start spraying this. Here's my faithful color wheel, and what I'm going to try to do with this is I want to get some of that green for the leaves in the background. I know that's something that I'm kind of keying off of. I also want to be able to get some flesh tones for her. So this red orange, that gives me a good range of flesh tone. So what I'm thinking in terms of is do I want to go a little bit more yellowy green with the leaves, or do I want to go straight up green? What I'm going to do is I'm going to end up getting rid. I'm going to lose some of my orange if I go with a more yellowy green, but I gain a more blue violet. And so I'm just kind of bouncing back and forth between the two of those to see which one kind of appeals to me. And I think I can kind of go with a more redder orange. I don't need something very, very orange. And quite frankly, I'll probably end up cheating. But this is kind of, this range of color and this color here is the colors that I'm going to use for this piece. I've got like a nice deep orange pencil here. So what I'm going to do is go in with right along the edges of some of these purples with this orange to kind of like bring on a little bit of enhancement to things. This is
Anna sent you a message that says Bernie Fuchs.
oh yeah.
Am I saying that correctly?
Yep, Bernie Fuchs.
It's like Bernie Fuchs, Bernie Fuchs.
Bernie Fuchs, Dave Grove, and even guys like Thomas Blackshear. Those guys were masters at this technique. In fact, for a long time, a lot of the spy and espionage novels had guys like Robert Hunt, who worked in oils, but still really explored this technique. But I think Dave Grove was one of the real true masters of this technique. In fact, if you go to Stuart Ing, he has a book by David Grove, and it is an absolute fantastic book. It's one of those books that I think every illustrator should have this, because it really gives you everything that you need to know if this is a technique that you'd like to explore. And the reason why I'm doing this this orange here is I like the idea of going over like right where light meets shadow, really boosting up the color where light meets shadow. And the cool thing is if you go outside in the sunlight, and I guess most of you, except for those in other countries, can't really do it. But if you go outside in the sunlight and you hold something over your skin that really casts a shadow, you'll see that the edge of that shadow, right where light and dark meet, that tends to be the brighter color. So I try to kind of get that effect. That's an effect that we're used to seeing subconsciously. So it's an effect that I try to put in my pieces as often as possible, because it really kind of gives things a lively sort of feel to them. And see if we can give you a tighter shot of that. But that's about where we're starting before I spray things down. Okay, and whilst I run into the other room with my can of fixative, Robert and Michelle will entertain you guys. But the thing about it is it's always a good idea to spray fix in a ventilated area if at all possible. Yeah, not kill your studio mates or anything like that. All right, but I'll be back with this in just a second.
I work in healthcare. I've smelled worse than that. Okay, so this is where we do the little show and tell while he's out of the room. So this is a beautiful little piece that Brian did. He was trying out some new materials. So it's a lovely little orchid shot. Lots of really great highlights and shadows on this thing. It's just gorgeous. And the reason he was trying it out was he was getting ready for this baby, which many in the group will have seen. This was the Disney villain from Baltimore this year, Ursula, and it turned out absolutely gorgeous. I just cannot tell you how much luminosity this thing has. It just glows. That color, magenta, purple, indigo, it just all looks absolutely gorgeous. So I thought everybody would enjoy another shot of this. That's a young Ursula, when she's been recently sent away from Atlantis, and you notice that she hasn't quite got the volume that she has in The Little Mermaid, but there's a little junk in the trunk, so she's on her way. So yeah, that's a lovely little piece that's going to be heading its way to its new home, probably in the month of January. So I thought you guys would enjoy seeing that. Let's see what else we got over here. Oh, this little big Michelle nuts. Give you another shot of the Nightwing.
This is actually mine. I don't know what other people think.
Yeah, Michelle is. I'll come up a little bit closer so you guys can kind of get a look at the face. Having seen the image when Brian sent it to me, I was like, "Wow, that looks really great." But I got to tell you, once you get the original in your hand, it's just so much better. I mean, the flesh tones and that brushwork in the background and the way his hair just kind of fades into the night. It's just awesome. So,
Hey, you know what? If people can't request the Black Bulls and all those other things, this one's off the table.
It's like, no more Nightwing. No more Nightwings. It's painful.
All right. And now there she is after she's been spray fixed. And what I'll do is I'll leave my color wheel up here to try and keep myself honest. And the cool thing about it is what I'm going to do. You know, I have and anyone who's kind of hung out with me at conventions or I've given a critique to at the shows know that I have a very structured approach to color theory. And basically that structured approach to color theory is, first of all, pick your subject. Because we're on YouTube, I can't express it the way that I normally express it at conventions.
No, you can't. Can't use that phrase. Thank you very much.
But the first thing is you absolutely have to pick your subject. And my subject for this piece is going to be this eye right here. I want that eye to just really kind of pop out at you. So that's my subject. And my subject, I've decided I'm going to make that eye sort of green. It's going to be that kind of very limey green. So that's my subject. And then I jump to pick your dominant color. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dominate this with green, but it's going to be mostly these olive greens. So these leaves in the background are going to be greens, but they're going to be olivey green. I'm also going to start everything off with ultramarine, which is a slightly warm blue. So that slightly warm blue over here is going to influence some of the limey or olive greens that I lay down, which will kind of bring things you know, down just a little bit. So that's kind of my color theory. That's gonna be my subject. Hopefully, when I'm done, that's going to be the thing that your eyes are attracted to every time you look at the piece. And my dominant color is going to be that green school. So it's going to be a mostly olive green. And I get to add all of these different types of reds and oranges into the piece. And that's going to be my flesh tones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see here. What I'm going to do is because I'm going to be throwing a lot of let's see what you want. There should be like a small board. No, I have it here. What I'm going to do, because I have this piece that I'm going to be throwing a lot of water at this, and I have no idea, you know, I need to be in control of it, whereas this desk is probably at about a 30-degree angle for me to draw on. If I'm working really wet, that means paint's just going to shoot down there, and I want to be in control of exactly what the paint does. So I've got this extra board that I'm going to use, and I'm going to take this extra board here, and I'll sort of tape the drawing down to this board just to make sure I'm in control of how this thing kind of tilts. And that's one of the things that's a little bit tricky about this paper is this paper's sort of thin in a way that just upsets me to no end. And because it's thin paper, that means it's going to sort of wrinkle and buckle and do all sorts of stuff. And there's really absolutely nothing I can do about that. All I can do is just kind of watch it wrinkle and buckle and just get upset. So what I'll do is I'll kind of tape down the top part of it. I'm not going to tape down the bottom of it because I want to allow it to do whatever it's going to do. The nice thing about this paper is that even though it's going to do all its buckling and all that stuff, by the time it completely dries, it'll flatten out again, which is kind of nice. And also a cool thing about this paper is it's 100% cotton. So it's made of the same stuff that your jeans are made of. So if it gets too wrinkly, what I can do is spray some water on the back of it, and maybe put a towel or something over it, and then go over it with an iron. So I can just literally iron it like it's a shirt or something like that. So I don't have to really be too concerned about making sure that it stays as flat as possible. I've sprayed it with fixative. I've given the fixative enough time to dry. And the question that I generally tend to get with this technique is exactly how much fixative to spray on it. And my answer is I have no idea. That completely changes when the conditions change. I mean, you might have like too much humidity. You might have a situation where the chemical composition of the fixative in that lot is different from a different lot. So really, you just got to kind of go for it. And one of the things that I absolutely hate, but also like about this technique, is you can never get this technique down pat. You're always going to be in a situation where you're going to have to react to what the technique gives to you. So, and again, I don't want to sort of mess with the board that much. What I want to happen here is I want the paint to be the board to be as fresh as possible. Every time you erase something on this, and you'll notice that even when I went over it with the eraser, it's very light with how I went over it with the eraser. Because the more you mess with the board, the more the paint is going to stick to the board. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to not play around with the board. And what I'm going to use here is I'm going to use like a little spray bottle and spray it down with water. That way I don't have to sort of go over it back and forth with a brush to get as much water down as possible.
I'm going to move this down just because people can't see the top of the color wheel. So let me see if we're in frame now.
Got to see the top of the color wheel.
Yeah, that's cool. If that could see your way, we can move it, but I just wanted to kind of see what you're doing in terms of color theory.
Cool. And as far as the brush that I'm using a tremendously cheap brand brush. I'm not, loyal as far as like brushes and all that stuff is concerned. And what I've done is I've taken this is Holbein gouache, and I've just kind of put it in a bottle and added, it's about half and half gouache and water, maybe 2/3 water, 1/3 gouache. So it's got like a pretty decent amount of gouache in there. And this way I can I don't have to mix gouache on the board, and at the same time I don't have to mix it on a little separate sheet and try to get it on the board. I know that this is consistent. I know that I have the same amount of gouache water mixture all the time, and I have right here, and this is something that I got from David Grove. As far as setting up my values are concerned, I don't have to kill myself doing all sorts of different values. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a combination of burnt sienna and ultramarine. So ultramarine is going to cover the cool areas of the board, and the burnt sienna is going to cover the warm areas of the board. So I'm just going to shake that up real nicely and have that at the ready. In fact, I'm going to even take the tops, open the tops of them so that I don't have to take that extra step when it comes time to doing it. And this part is generally the scariest part of doing this technique.
Yeah, so just to recap for those of you who weren't here at the beginning of the broadcast, it's going to look like he's messing this up 100%.
Yeah.
Have faith.
Not only have faith, but give me faith.
Yeah, he's done this at a couple conventions where people have just been, WTF?
You can see it.
Yeah, you're down too far. There you go.
Right. So that's and I'm hoping that that's enough to cover myself. I'll make sure my brush is wet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and just sort of smear around the burnt sienna first.
Any reason why?
Well, I don't mind if the blue gets contaminated a little bit, but I would really like it for the burnt sienna to stay as pure as possible.
Because that's where her face is.
Yeah, that's where her face is going to be, and I want the lighter colors to really kind of stand out.
So just like there, where you kind of pull the burnt sienna up into it.
Yeah.
You don't mind it getting into the blue.
Yeah, it's not gonna hurt things if it gets in there a little bit. In fact, what I'm gonna do is kind of go in here and pull some of that up into there. Here we go.
Yeah, it's doing what you want.
And I want to have like some mixture of the two, but at the same time, I want them to stay a little bit separate.
Thanks. So just a reminder, I'm posting pics up on the Facebook page if you want to get a better look at the image while we're working on it.
Right, and technically, I should wait until this is relatively dry. But what I like doing is I like cheating a little bit and going in and pulling like as much stuff as possible early on. And one of the nice things, because you can't see, is I am not putting the brush in my mouth at all.
Which he is good for.
So at no point will you see me actually putting the brush in my mouth, which is a good thing.
You hear me smacking him, you know he's done it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anyone that's ever seen Brian do this technique and watched the people around the first time, Stefan Roux was at Heroes Con. I think Michelle actually captured a photo of him just slack jaw, agape, like, what the? I don't understand what he's doing. Cass Canetti was actually sitting on the stage, and it just blew her mind. She was just like, oh my gosh, what is he doing? So yeah, it's definitely a technique that people tend to be like, oh my gosh.
Right now, I'm just kind of going through and pulling out some of those actual highlighted areas. And what's really nice is I can get some really good pulls on this, especially with this paper.
Yeah, Jake says this is the first time he's actually watched the paint drops, and that looks anxiety-inducing. Yes, Jake, it does create quite a bit of anxiety in others. I think sometimes even in Brian,
Yeah.
That moment of fear where you're like, this is happening now.
Yeah, I think to master this technique, you have to be okay with the possibility that you're painting something that you're going to throw away.
Yeah, the first time he did this for a guy, it was at Heroes, and he told the guy, hey, here's a really good illustration, and I hope you like it, but just understand, the next step, I might screw this up. Are you okay with that? Louis says it's like doing finger paints.
Oh, yeah. And I'm just pulling some of this stuff out while it's wet. And I know because I'm pulling it while it's wet, it's gonna give me some really soft edges. Because what's gonna happen is even though I'm pulling it while it's wet, the some of the paint is gonna fill back in. But that softness will still be there. Then what I can do is I have the option of being able to later kind of go back in and either pull those out a little bit more, or I can kind of leave them as they are. But I really like the fact that you can get pretty harsh with this, but pretty subtle at the same time, especially when it gets to that certain sweet spot of wetness, when it's at that perfect area where even though you're pulling the paint out, it almost feels like you're putting white paint down. And you really get a good chance to control it. But again, what I'm doing here is I'm pulling stuff out, and I have a plan to do more color on top of this. And these leaves that are up here, I definitely plan on going back over this stuff and adding some Prismacolor to it, so that it has like a nice levels of opacity in it. The cool thing is I mean, you can use anything to do this. I personally like using a brush because the brush tends to be a little bit more subtle, but it's cool to use even a Q-tip or something like that. And if you do this technique on gesso, you really have like a lot more options on what you can do to pull it out of there. In fact, with gesso, one of the things that's really cool is not only can you pull it out, but if absolutely necessary, you can even go back in with white gesso if your pulls aren't as good as you want them to be. But the only problem that I have with doing this technique on gesso is that with gesso, like you see how this kind of, where you get some of that ultramarine just kind of flowing into that burnt sienna. With gesso, the paint just kind of sits there. It doesn't really like moving around. You have to move it around. It doesn't really want to do anything on its own. It doesn't. I mean, watercolors, we call that kind of aquarelle, where the paint just kind of flows into itself. You put down one color and you put down another color, and as the painter, you just kind of watch them do their thing. But on gesso, the paint just doesn't do anything. It just kind of lays there, and you end up having to go in and move it around. And if you stop moving it around, it stops moving. So it's kind of, I find that a little bit on the annoying side. Also, you can see that it's a good idea to do your drawing a little bit darker than you think you need it to be. So when you start working on a drawing, you're working on a white sheet of paper, and you'll have a tendency to naturally do it a little bit lighter than you think. So when I do the drawing, I'll kind of go for it, but then I'll always make it a point to kind of go, okay, well, I know it should be darker than that. And doing this technique, this wash is just the first wash. Sometimes when I do this technique, I'll do 1, 2, sometimes 3 washes. And all of that depends on the quality of the wash I get. Like I'm getting some really good pulls here. the stuff is kind of coming off the board really nicely. But sometimes when I do this technique, the paint just flies off the board. I mean, it just goes right to white as soon as I touch it with the brush. And when that happens, the pulls are too strong. So if the pulls are too strong, that means I have to go back into it and lay down some more paint and do the pulls again. But the cool thing is with this one, I won't have to do it again. I can kind of park it where it is now. And the nice thing, like on these leaves, I can kind of think of how the sunlight's coming in, and what I'm on this first pull on these leaves, I'm just getting the leaves a little bit lighter. And when you're getting really, and I talk about good pulls and bad pulls, when you get good pulls, you can actually render with the pull. So I can actually sort of come in here and get something that's almost as light as the white of the board, but I can ease the brush off the board, and the stroke lightens or eases up as it goes. So I can go from the absolute like white of the board, pull it all the way out to where I just have a little bit of paint to the original kind of ultramarine layer that I lay down. Like I'm thinking in terms of the light kind of coming in this way. So even though I pull that leaf at first, I'm going to go back into this leaf. Pull this edge just a little bit lighter. And I'm not concerned that much about details at this point. This isn't the part of, and I did not put the brush in my mouth.
Oops.
Yeah, this
Glad I'm sitting over here.
this
You
part,
didn't see it.
yeah, this part of the illustration is not about the details. So I'm really not going to concern myself with trying to get in there and get all those like tiny bits of details. The tiny bits of details, I'm going to handle that with either Prismacolor pencils or some type of opaquing medium. So I don't really need to concern myself with that right now. What I'm doing right now is my light and dark patterns. So I'm kind of thinking in terms of the patterns that I set up in the original illustration, which I kind of drew on the back of this. So I'm making sure those shadows and lights, those light and dark patterns are well represented. And what I'm doing up here is this is kind of that. I mean, my path of detail needs to be through here. So so this stuff up here, I don't really even want this very dark. I want this to be kind of light and muddled up here. And again, you know, not looking for details at this point. And the coolest thing about this technique is it's really depending on kind of the formulation you get, depending on the quality of the application of fixative and all of that stuff. That's going to determine your technique. But there's a couple of ways to kind of do this. What I can do is I can just kind of go over this. I'm just going over this with not a very soupy brush, but going over it with a wet brush, kind of getting that leaf wet. And now what I'm going to do is give that a little bit of time to soak in, But I'm drying my brush out. I'm gonna get my brush as dry as I can. And then what I'll do is I'll go back over that leaf because I mean you can kind of see a little bit of a shine on that because it's wet. Now I'm gonna go back over that leaf. And because it got wet, it's gonna be easier to kind of pull that pigment off of it. So that's kind of working out for me.
All right.
Right now the face is dry enough for me to really actually start getting into the details. And when I say details, I'm not talking details. I'm talking just the lights and darks. And what's cool is because I've laid that orange down ahead of time, the edges of these shadows here have that nice bright orange on them. I'm kind of going in and just pulling the paint off of here and getting a good separation of shadows and light. Like advanced rendering and all of that stuff, not really concerned about that right now. I want to make sure my shadows and lights are working. And if those are working, then later on I can get into all the stuff with details. And even though I did this in sort of ultramarine and burnt sienna, those aren't the colors. What that was is just kind of establishing temperature. I want it to be warmer down here and cooler up here. So I'm not really going to be doing colors until the second veil of wash that I put down. Everything cool over there?
Yep, we're doing well. Anna posted an abbreviated link, which was good. So I used that one over on Facebook and on Twitter, and we've got a few more folks commenting now.
Very cool.
Yeah, we've been between 18 and 20 viewers.
Hey, that's a nice gang.
Yeah, that's a nice rounded number.
I know some people online are coming in, I think.
Did you put a link? Good. Yeah, we're making Louis late for shopping. He thought we were going to be like done and he can go shopping.
No.
So he's like, what am I going to eat this week?
That's the plan. We discussed it in detail.
Sorry, Louis, you're going to have to go to the A&P tomorrow morning.
Our plan is to crash whatever plans Louis makes.
Yeah. No Shoppers Food Warehouse for you, dude. Tommy just retweeted, so I don't know whether Tommy's been watching or just from the tweet realized we were online. So.
Sweet.
See, that's the thing with different social medias. People sometimes only use one or the other. So I should have done the links earlier, I guess.
Social media.
Yes.
Humbug.
It's kind of an oxymoron. Social media. Step while you're away from it.
All right. And something else, like doing this technique on this paper, because nothing else that I've ever worked on pulls as well as this paper. But man, let me tell you what upsets me about this paper. In fact, take a look at that. Look at how curly that stuff is, man. So you have to kind of like weigh the consequences. It's like, do I want good pulls or do I want flat paper? And like I said, for every medium you can work on with this technique, there's benefits and drawbacks. And if you have a super special $300 brush, do not do this technique with it. Because this technique is a brush killer.
So we're doing it to Anna again. We're talking about food, and it's 12:30 in the morning in Germany. And
Wow.
She said, "Stomach is growling."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Louis said he'll be shopping at the 7-Eleven tonight.
Buying food for the kids at 7-Eleven.
Ooh, Cully retweeted it too, so that's cool.
Ah, the man. Actually, I was texting with Cully a little bit earlier today. And you know, we're doing vampires today because all of this kind of dovetails into the book that I'm working on with Boom Comics. So if you get an opportunity, check out those guys.
Shameless plug time for those of you that aren't familiar with it.
Ah,
There's the trade paperback for the first 4
you should
issues.
show this one.
Oh, well, that's, yeah, I'll show this one, but this is the one I don't think anyone's going to be able to find. This is the very cool limited edition hardback that has the beautiful wraparound painting that I just posted on Christmas Eve for everyone to see. So, but yeah, definitely run out and get yourself a copy.
Yep. And the cool thing about this is you can really just start to see those patterns on her kind of start to come out. That's one of the reasons why originally when I was setting things up, I wanted to make sure that that the leaves weren't too random. If they're too random, then they kind of completely obscure the face. But if you just make it random enough, then you can recognize that the pattern of the face. Yeah, one of the things that I like about this technique, and I'll hold the image a little bit closer to the camera after I kind of get into it a little bit after I'm finished with this. But it's a brushless technique. I mean, the drawing I do it with a really sort of dry kind of pastel pencil. So the drawing picks up the grain of the paper. It has that pebbly texture to it.
Yeah.
And this part here, where I'm actually pulling the paint off the board, again, even though it's paint, I'm pulling it off the board, which also gives the paint that kind of.
So in here you can see it, and then up here you can actually start to see like the texture of the board.
Back. It really kind of brings back that pebble quality to it. So so what ends up happening is you have the pebble quality of the pencil, you have the pebble quality of the paint, and then when I go over it with Prismacolor again, the Prismacolor has a pebbly texture to it. So every technique ends up having a sort of a texture of the board. So it really kind of ends up where all these different techniques, or if I did it on a smooth board, they would look very obviously different. But because I'm doing it all on the same board and I'm using the texture of the board for every stroke, it ends up looking like something that just kind of emerges from a random wash rather than something that is actually painted.
So at this point, you can actually see where the black, white, gray composition would be into play, because you've got your deep shadow, and then you've got your midtones for the gray, and then you got your highlights for the white.
Yep. And the cool thing is, thus far, I'm doing everything with this giant number 12 brush.
So you haven't swapped out yet. Mind you, he's licked this thing to a point, but he hasn't swapped out.
No. I actually haven't licked it at all. there's no brush licking going on. Now I'm kind of going in and doing the eyes here. And as I'm doing the eyes,
Anna wants to point out that she did get a David in the live stream because we held up the trade paperbacks.
Sweet.
So Jeff up in Canada says that this is a lot of fun, and he can't make the kids go to bed, so he can't watch it. He's hoping that it'll stay up on YouTube for a while. So Jeff, if you're listening, Brian actually set up this Google Hangout, and when he did that, he also set up a YouTube station as well that you guys are actually watching. And the YouTube station should have these up after we're done, so you'll actually be able to go back and rewatch them at a later date. So.
And like the way the face is turning out now, everything's kind of coming into play. So what I'm going to do is just really go for those other little areas of where I think I can pull a little bit more to kind of really enhance things. I'm going to do a little bit of edge polishing on some of the stuff. And also I'm going to see about bringing the teeth out here. And again, the cool thing is I'm going to bring it out, pretty light here, but I also reserve the right to be able to go back into that with some opaques and enhance that even more. And this is one of the things that I think is really cool about this technique is some of this stuff I pulled off a little bit earlier, and you can tell that the paint's kind of bled back into it. So you get some really cool, like random.
Get a nice close up of the face there. Louis just popped up on my screen. So. Yes, Louis is texting me.
So you get a real nice random quality to things, and I think that's kind of what makes a technique is every part of it isn't stuff that I'm in control of. A lot of the stuff is not stuff that I'm in control of, but stuff that I have to react to. Like the paint has decided that it wants the piece to go this way, and I have to kind of work with that. And anytime I'm working with paint that kind of allows me to sort of ride that random quality, I think is cool. Now, with what I have here, I think everything's working. I can kind of see the face pretty well. I like the turn of the face. But back in here, what's happening is the face is actually getting falling into the shadows. So what I'm going to do is just for my black, white, gray, and to make sure that you can really see the face, is I'm going to go in here and pull out some of this stuff on the negative side of the face, so that I don't actually lose the face into those shadows. I'm not going to do too much of it because I want some of it to get lost in there, but I want a few light points to sort of show up so that it really kind of describes the edge of that face pretty well. I'm not going to do it up here because I've got this light area here that's kind of, in a sense, with black, white, gray composition, I'm constantly looking for a light area to fall into a dark area to butt up against a light area. So anytime I've got like a good setup with dark and light meeting, I don't need to do anything with it. But if I've got something that's a little bit too dark meeting up with something else that's a little bit too dark, like this chin down here, I've got that dark blending into that dark down there. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go in here just a little bit and pull out some of the light under that chin, so that it kind of describes the face really well there. And then what I'll do is I'll pull out some of this light up here, so I get the edge of that. This leaf here, or not the leaf, but the light value that I've got down there, that works for me. But I need to really get the edge of the head, so I'm gonna kind of pull a random light area right in here, so that I get something describing the edge of the head there. And that's kind of what I'm doing now, is just kind of policing things to make sure that that things are, my black, white, gray, and the image is holding itself together. So I'm going to pull out some of that eye, and this isn't going to be the eye. This isn't going to be a part of the illustration that I want to really pop out. So I'm going to pull out that, but I'm not going to get crazy about it. I'm just going to pull out a little bit of it, and I may not do any true opaquing in there because I want that eye, and that's something I've talked about before. When I'm doing an illustration that features both eyes, I try not to enhance both. And we're back. So I think we just had a little bit of a hang up there. I'm hoping that we're absolutely back. Looks like YouTube is going to be a little bit on the challenging side tonight. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with the way things are going there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and because the light is coming in from here, I'm going to go in and make sure that this side of the face over here is a little bit lighter. I want to get that to be as pure as possible, so that the lighter color that I put down really kind of stands up there.
Okay, Louis says we're back up. So.
Very nice.
So let's make sure. Post it here.
So I'm just going in and lightening up the lightest areas of this, so that I really have a good separation of light and shadows. And
New water.
not just yet. I'm gonna need some new water when I get into the transition. And again, I talked about the path of detail. Actually, if you can grab some napkins out of the cabinet. Talked about the path of detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that things up here are a little bit lighter. So what I'm going to do is go over this stuff with the big brush. Get another one there. I'm going to go over this stuff with a big brush and kind of do a general lighten up here. And I also think that edge on the other side is calling a little bit too much attention to itself. So I'm going to go and soften that up just a bit. And again, what I'm doing here is I'm just looking after my black, white, gray composition. This edge over here, I think, is it's a really high contrast edge. What's going on is this is a very dark color meeting a very light edge, and a lot of times when that happens, it really calls attention to itself. And what I want is any attention that's gonna, any area of high contrast is gonna sort of capture your eyes. So what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that I soften up these areas of high contrast, just so that they're not as attractive as the high contrast that I'm going to set up over here. So even in this stuff down here, it's not really important stuff, but what I'm going to do is kind of go in and soften that edge. So you can kind of see a little bit more of the drawing there, and even out here, I think like a lot of times when I do this on my watercolor pieces, or even in some of the acrylic pieces, I'll go over it with a different color, and that different color is always a little bit lighter than the background color. And with that different color being lighter than the background color, it's one of those things where it kind of looks cool, but at the same time, it's reducing the contrast. And I really want that contrast to not stick out as loud as it was. So now with those edges kind of softened up a bit, it kind of brings your attention back in here rather than looking at those sharp edges. And as I kind of like go through this, I might kind of decide, okay, well, you know, I might want to put some additional color over those edges, or you know, do some different things with them. But I'm pretty happy with how that's going now. What I'll do is I'll kind of go over this edge one more time to make sure that I've got it as light as the paper is going to allow. And the really cool thing is you definitely want to make sure you're using a pretty decent board with this stuff, because you're really going to be pulling this stuff off the board like left and right. So you want to use like something like a really good Strathmore board. I would absolutely avoid this technique with watercolor paper, mainly because watercolor paper is designed so that the paint goes into the board rather than sits on top of it. This board has got a really decent sizing on it, and the paint never gets down into the board that well. Yeah, so this is giving me some really good pulls. I'm getting all the way back to nearly the white of the paper. And something that I want you to think about while you're doing this type of stuff is, as soon as I touch the brush to the board, it's getting stuff wet. So now I want to make sure I pull it in the direction where I'm not moving the dark back into the piece. I'm moving the dark sort of away from it. So as it fades and gets darker as I'm going down, I can kind of move the dark that way. But these areas where I want that contrast, I mean, again, I went through and reduced the contrast here. Now I'm kind of going into here, and I want to pick up that contrast. I want that contrast to be as loud and obnoxious as possible. And again here, just kind of some cool specular highlights that happen because the light is coming in here, so that nose is kind of turned right where these corners are. Those are the corners that are going to be picking up the light. So I want to pop those out as much as possible. And make sure I've got the turn of that nose just right. But at the same time, I want to leave a little bit of dark there. I'm kind of monitoring things here. I'm kind of looking at how things are going, making sure the face is well represented there. And I'm just looking at it, and I think I'd be a little bit happier if I got a little bit of an edge here on that lip. It's not much, but just a little something to kind of put a little activity on that side of the face. All right, so that's about as pulled out as I think I'm going to need things. And what I'm going to do, because the next layer is going to be putting down some acrylic paint, but with this gouache remains water soluble forever. So what I want to do is I want to avoid putting acrylic on top of the gouache and then smearing the gouache around and just having like a real muddy mess. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go over the gouache with a little bit of fixative again to make sure I've got it. And again, I'm looking for that path of detail going through here. So this stuff up here is a little bit too loud for me. So what I'm going to do is kind of go in and soften those edges up a little bit. And pushing the contrast over here into my path of detail. And again, it's easier for me to pull this off because of this paper, and the paper's giving me some really awesome ability to pull stuff. I can pull stuff to white, I can get some good grayscales in here. And now that I've kind of reduced all of the contrast, this is almost like going over it with Photoshop and just doing a general contrast reduction. So I'm gonna bring back a few of those absolute lights. Cool.
She's wondering how long.
I don't know. We'll sort of take care of this one, and then we'll might have time for one more after this. So.
Okay, he's saying he's going to finish this one and may do another one after this. After 9 o'clock, because it's.
All right.
Hold on.
I'm gonna bring these sort of leaf folds back. I think he's saying that Michelle's going to drive us home. So I think we're good to go. I like the contrast that we've got set up here.
I'm sorry.
Things are kind of working out. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and jump in there with the fixative, and make sure everything's kind of like nice and held at this point. And again, for Michelle and Robert's sake, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the other room and lay the fixative down. And the nice thing about this is I can, this part of the illustration where you're just kind of pulling those lights out, I mean, you can really spend all day doing this. And because I'm going to hit this with fixative, I don't want the board to be too wet when I hit it with the fixative. So I'm going to kind of go in and pull some of the moisture out of this. And at this point, it's so close to dry that that me putting the napkin down on it isn't actually pulling more paint off of it. It's just kind of pulling a little bit of that dryness off of the board. And by the way, since some people want me to kind of give up all the materials that I'm using, these are IKEA brand napkins. These are the giant ones that you can get for like nothing.
Really, Ryan?
Yes, IKEA brand napkins. I only use IKEA brand napkins. All right. So what I'm going to do now, in fact, I'll hold this up a little bit closer so you can kind of get a better look at the details of what's going on here. So you can see the cool thing is I'm getting like a lot of the grain of the paper, even down in areas like this, where I'm getting some of the browns and some of the blues mixing together, but I'm getting those great light pulls off of that dark contrast.
Sorry. Carly just says, watching the live stream, I'm pretty sure none of you are wearing pants.
We are not. No one here is wearing pants.
No one is wearing pants.
Okay.
Pants are optional.
So what we'll do is I'll put my flower marker there while I run into the other room right quickly and give this a nice spray down with the workable fixative.
Sorry guys, I don't do jokes. But I can do drawings.
Okay, thank you.
I need a Sharpie.
I know. Oh, I'm sorry.
Done already?
Huh? Done already. And now.
A picture of you.
Hey. And now that's after the second layer of fixative. So so far what we've got is the drawing, which was fixative, which I put fixative over. Then we jumped in with the gouache, just kind of let things go and then pull things off with just using the water. And now I'm done with that stage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down another stage of color. So this right now is my warm and cool values on the piece. So right now I have to kind of go through and actually add color to the piece. And the color to the, that I'm going to add is going to be acrylic color. So I'm going to make sure we're mostly dry here. And the color that I'm going to use, in fact, Michelle. And and what's really cool is thus far, I've painted out of the same sort of jar of water. I'm not bothering to. I haven't bothered to change it up until this point, but now I'm making the move from actual gouache into acrylics. So what I'll do is I'll change the water over to make sure things are really working for me. And again, this is my color theory that I'm going for here. I think we settled on this right here. So what I want to do is I want most of this to be kind of greens, everything from a bright yellow green to a deep olive green, and I get to use all of these colors here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dominate the piece with a green first, and then after that I'm going to start adding in some of these other sort of lighter flesh tony colors. Depending on how things are working out, I would like to have some of the greens in the face here as well. So I might end up doing a lot of this stuff with Prismacolor. And Prismacolor is kind of a semi-opaque medium. It's not absolutely opaque, but I'm just going to try to just kill the top of this with green and diminish the green as I go down, and maybe bring up a little more green down in here. Okay, and what's nice is I'm getting almost accidentally some really cool kind of purples and violets in there. But I'm probably going to add some of those in with the Prismacolor also, kind of use it as something to enhance the separation of lights and shadows. So let me get some green going over here. And the greens we will feature today is going to be these two guys. So I have a green gold, which is kind of a yellowy green, and then I have a permanent green. In fact, I might go for a little phthalo green also.
Not the phthalo green.
Yeah, so let's go for that combination. Phthalo green is going to be sort of a phthalo green yellow shade, because I'm going for more of a yellowy green. This green is sort of not quite in my color theory. This green is a little bit more of a middle of the road green, and I want my greens to sort of go from the yellowy green to the olive category. So this green is if I need a little extra sort of enhancer in there. So this is kind of the greens that I'm going to hang out with, and all the other stuff I'll apply as necessary.
So Louis has now said he will be able to watch it on his phone as he shops at the store.
Oh man!
Technology has allowed him to now multitask.
Louis is hardcore.
That is dedication.
And the cool thing about this is, even though I've just kind of gone over it with fixative twice, so this stuff is really about as fixative as I can get with it. I'm still going to pile a lot of water on this board. And since I'm going to pile a lot of water on the board, gouache always remains water soluble. So what I want to do is, when I put this green down, I still don't want to have to get in there and mess with the green that much. So I'm a little bit afraid of how much green I can put on here without sort of starting to smear the blue all over the place. So what I'm going to do is, rather than having to paint and paint and paint and paint and get the green in there, I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to hit the board with a spritzer, which is going to make sure that there's a little bit of water on every inch of the board. Then I'm going to just start applying that green in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and squeeze all three of my key greens out on a palette. And the palettes that I use is nothing special. It's just kind of a sheet of Strathmore 300 board. I mean, I suppose it would be nicer if I used an actual like palette, but one of the things one of the reasons why I always use paper palettes is because I know how it's going to look on paper. I don't like, using a plastic or Teflon palette and then putting that paint on paper, because it always looks a little different to me. And what I also want to do is I want to get a little bit of orange going as well. And if you're using the same acrylics that I'm using, the Holbein Golden's Fluid acrylics, that's going to be Vat Orange. And Vat Orange is really cool. It's a nice, very, very, very deep kind of orange. It's a little bit on the red side, which kind of helps me out. But the nice thing about vat orange is that it's a little bit opaque, but it is tremendously intense. And the cool thing again is I've got this mounted, so it's going to be a little bit easier for me to kind of move it around and control exactly where the water goes. So now I'm going to hit things with the spritzer, and at this point, one of the things that I'm going to watch out for when I hit things with the spritzer is it's possible that I can be like three.
Brian, do you want anything from Lexi?
No, I'm good.
No.
And what I'll do is and this green gold does not play. This green gold is crazy bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of green gold on here first. And it's going to be pretty easy for me to take this green gold and move it into flesh tone. So I'm going to lay my green gold down. And what I'll do is I'll get a little bit of orange. And the main reason why I'm putting orange into this is a lot of this down here is white, and that I can't really get any good stuff going on white. So if I put a little bit of orange down, that gives something for the Prismacolor to stand on top of. So now you can kind of see that getting a little bit of actual color in there. Now I've got the green gold and I've got the orange where I want it. And now I'm going to come in with a little bit of my middle of the road green. And because this is a middle of the road green, it's and it's relatively transparent. It can't actually get to middle of the road green because I'm laying it on top of that blue. And what that blue is going to do is that blue is going to kill it just a little bit and push it towards the lovely blue-green that my color theory allows. You know, or bluish violet, right? A little more green in here, just a little bit down here. All right, now.
Uh-oh, Connie's up, and she says it just went down right when she got on.
Oh man.
So hopefully Connie's refreshed and is back on with the rest of us.
Good morning, Australia.
Anna says, can you repeat what to look out for when wetting the paper again? Because that's when we lost it.
Okay. When I wet the paper again, what I'm really looking for is I'm using my spritzer and I'm kind of monitoring if there's any beading. If the actual spritzer, when I put the color in there, if I'm getting the colors beading on the paper. Because if the colors are beading on the paper, that means I'm not gonna really get the paint down there. So what I'll do is I'll kind of like check it out. If I get some bleeding, what I'll do is I'll kind of like brush over the paper a couple of times to make sure that, you know, like the more you brush over it, the more you're kind of wetting the fixative. So I'm, in a sense, softening the fixative. And what that does is that guarantees that I can actually get like, you know, some paint, some pigment actually down on the paper. But at the same time, I don't want to brush it too much. All right, and again, I'm doing this again. I'm kind of pulling some color off of there because I don't want that stuff to be too attractive up there. I want a nice path of detail. And, you know, I've created a super hard edge green right here, so I'm gonna kind of get in there and soften that edge up as well. And I've got like a nice little bit of soup down here, which is which, unless I continuously hold the board at this perfect angle, that's
You're
gonna just
lose it.
Yeah, that's gonna just mess me up. So
no one's, I shouldn't say no one, but a few people are not believing that you're not in constant control because they're watching this thing come together in awe. So Connie's back up and she said she's cursing like a mad woman. Thank God no one can hear her. So we're trying to be good tonight, Connie, because Anna's warned us that since we've had to switch platforms and we're now over on YouTube, that if we say anything slightly blue, we could have the whole video pulled down. So we're trying very hard to be good boys in the studio.
I am like just I've got an F-bomb loaded and ready to go. And you know, I apologize because at this point in the game, you know, we're looking at like a lot of like wet paper, and you know, you've got like a lot of shine happening that's sort of probably giving you a really distorted view of things.
Well, luckily, the when you pick it up, it actually loses some of that. Because like we're getting a much brighter image in the studio than they're getting on the screen from the looks of it. So
very cool.
Yeah. So the camera is definitely helping out.
Right. And again, because of just the technique itself, what's really cool about this is when I go through and I pull up some of this stuff, I'm actually not only getting just the value pull, but because the color underneath it was a little bit of that violet, because that blue was mixing with that that purple that I originally laid down. It's really kind of given a cool effect. And again, you know, Robert just mentioned that it seems like I'm in control of this. What's really cool about it is I would like for it to do that, but and I was kind of, in my original drawing, I was sort of hoping that it would do that, but not until I'm actually pulling it off of the board do I realize if it worked out or not. So so there's a lot of stuff that I hope for.
So to recap, like originally, like you said, you wanted the eye to kind of go in that direction, and all that's working out for you. You lighten this up so it kind of balances off a little bit. You put in some negative space to the side of the face to help push it forward. Yeah. So any elements that you feel like you haven't hit that you were shooting for?
Yeah, what's going to happen is and again, it's to enhance this path of detail where I want like the eye to sort of move up here. The stuff that's over here is really not that important, so please don't watch. And the stuff that's over here in the corner, it's not important, so I don't need your eyes over there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some dirty tricks to make sure that you stay over here and all through this path here. So what I'm going to do, and again, I've got some red violets and violets, and I can still bring in to make sure that things are that I can actually kind of get your eyes in on things. And also I have some issues that I'm going to tackle with value. I'd like for the value of this eye, I'm going to lose it. You know, I'm just going to let this eye over here be primarily shadows and just kind of vanish into the background. So that's working for me. But this eye, that eye is important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over that eye with some darks to sort of just really enhance my values in there. And then I'm going to go over that eye, just the lighter parts of that eye with a few opaques so that it really stands out. And something else to pay attention to is everything that's green here now is green, but it has a little bit of blue, or it has a little bit of burnt sienna in it, ultramarine blue or burnt sienna. So nothing you see so far is pure color.
And the fantastic part about the paper is you're actually getting almost a texture on the leaves that you've got like almost 3 different shades on each one of these leaves here, which is really awesome.
Yeah. So and you know, one of the things that that I'm doing now is I'm trying to make sure that I keep the board relatively flat so that I'm not actually getting like, you know, really uncontrolled drips. I'm paying attention to where these things are drying and if they're dry enough for me to lay the board down without like just weirdness happening. So I'm kind of like, I can get a little bit of work done, you know, while it's still in the drying process, and I still want to be able to kind of get in here and kind of create like some interesting edges. And you know, again, I don't want these areas of contrast to kind of jump out there, so I'm going to go back and get myself on contrast patrol and make sure nothing is trying to steal the stage away from my subject.
Okay, while it's drying, let me grab another one.
So for those online, we're posting up pictures. So if you want to see close-ups, you can find them over at the Facebook page.
I've returned from the land of chicken. And I feel it is pertinent to announce to everyone that one Cully Hamner knows in fact how to dress himself.
For those of you that don't know who Cully Hamner is, that joke may be lost on you. For those of you that do, you may think we're being a little too kind. So
He's watching, he knows.
but we love Cully.
Sort of.
Okay, I love Cully. Michelle is indifferent.
I love you, Cully.
And this is going pretty smoothly. I think everything that needs to happen is happening here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of speed the drying process along a little bit. Normally I would do this with like a hair dryer or something like that. Oh, we can't put that up there. While you're waiting.
Oh, we did that one, but there's new people, so that's cool.
Yeah, let's.
No, it's mine, don't worry.
It's Michelle is still lusting after the nightmare.
I'm not lusting, it's mine.
So actually, with this one, what I'm going to do is hit it with the heater for a little bit, just to kind of like. And normally when I do washes, I actually prefer not to use a hair dryer or anything like that. And if I do use a hair dryer or a heater, I wait until the washes have settled down. Mainly because when you use a hair dryer or a heat gun, what ends up happening is it blows the pigment around a little bit, and as the pigment gets blown around, one of the things that I like is different colored pigments has different weight, and it settles onto the paper in different ways. So what ends up happening is if you don't use a hair dryer, you get a great quality of, like, you know, you'll see blues next to browns. So when you're holding the original, it has like a great quality to it. But if you use a hair dryer, what you're doing is you're keeping those pigments in an emulsion, and when they settle down at the same time, so it makes the color like flat. So if I if I can avoid it, I'll avoid using a hairdryer. But this is actually kind of, the pigment on this is dry enough to where the actual pigment has already settled. So using a hairdryer, isn't actually moving the pigment around any. So now this is nice and dry. And the thing about it is in fact, for all you oil painters, check that out. I'll take one. All right, so and again, I'm looking at where things are going. We're really happy with the black, white, gray composition so far. My values are doing more or less what I need my values to do. Now what I'm gonna concentrate on is just those little enhancements that I need. And I'm gonna mostly do that stuff with the Prismacolor pencil. And again, what really makes this technique is the fact that every bit of material that I use on here, going from the pastel pencil into the gouache into the acrylics, they all sort of behave. They're all kind of mastered by the texture of the paper. So this technique, more than any other technique that I use, when you look at it, even when you look at the original, you can't tell where the drawing necessarily stops and the washes begin, or where the Prismacolor work is. It all kind of like blends gracefully into each other. And with the Prismacolor work, again, I'm going to pay careful attention to the color theory that I've got set up. So I'm going to grab like just a handful of colors that I think is going to work for me. And the problem that I always have with Prismacolor pencils is Prismacolor seems to be really good at producing the color right next to the color that I want, and not the actual color that I want. If you guys want to know exactly which Prismacolors I'm using, just ask and I'll kind of pass that on. But there's a few favorites that I have, and I always lean towards those. Michelle.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Michelle.
And I'm definitely kind of going through and making sure that the colors that are on my color wheel are well represented here. There's going to be a few enhancing colors that I'm going to use, a few. So I'm literally going through and making sure that I've got these colors that are there. I'm really looking at the values. One of the cool things to pay attention to is every fiber in my body wants to pull out some just bright lime green and just go all nuts in the leaves. But the problem is if I do that, that's going to create, again, very high contrast. And that contrast, if that contrast is greater than the contrast in here, it's going to make that the subject rather than this the subject. So a couple of things that I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over some of this stuff with just a little bit of color, just to kind of enhance my my contrast. And since it's in my color theory and it is one of my favorite colors, I'm going to go in with the Dioxazine Violet. And just put like a few absolute darks, around the eyes to make sure that the eyes maintain being the subject of the piece. But I'm going to try to be a little bit careful with this. I don't want it to be so dark to where it doesn't seem like it's a part of the technique of the rest of the illustration. And this is indeed a situation where, man, if I had made those darks darker in the beginning, I wouldn't have to do this. But I was a little too careful. And you know, again, when I do this, I'm working really wet. I want the color to be as wet as possible, because if the color is really wet, it's gonna really, again, pick up the texture of that paper, and that's really the thing that I'm after, is getting the texture of the paper as represented as possible.
Okay, looking at the viewer count, we've increased our viewership to about 27. It's been jumping between like 25 and 30. For anybody that came in new, this is actually a new site that we used to do Justin TV, and when we decided to start today, we discovered Justin TV was no longer a viable option. So we decided to do the Google Hangout, and then from that, it sets up a YouTube. So this is a live stream on YouTube, but it should be archived when we're done. So if you came late, you should be able to go back and watch the whole session. We've been at it for about an hour and 45 minutes right now. Anybody have any questions, you can actually email. I've been posting things up over on the Facebook page. You can post a question there. I'll grab it off of there. If you're in the Yahoo group, you can have already been posting questions and comments. That's cool. I'll check Twitter as well in case anybody wants to, whatever your social media form is, we're going to try to capture any of your questions or comments.
So again, I'm just kind of going in and making sure that that the eyes are the subject of this piece. But I don't want to just jump in there and just crank it down. I want to kind of be as subtle as possible with it. So I'm kind of easing in with these colors. This is the dioxazine violet. I'm making it as subtle as I possibly can. You know, that way, you know, the eyes kind of really kind of jump out at you. Okay, I'm gonna go in a little bit darker here. Again, I'm working really wet, kind of allowing the paint to sort of get in there and then fall into the paper. So again, if I move this up a little closer, you can see that the eyes are a little bit darker than everything else, or the eye is a little bit darker than everything else, but it still has the texture of everything else. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start bringing in some, and what's really cool is out here where I laid down that that green gold first. It's got a lot of green in the leaves already, and I really like the way that that's turning out. But that green isn't going everywhere that I need it to go. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I have a green that's a step down in value. So what I'll do is I'll kind of real lightly push some of that green into some of this other stuff. And the cool thing about this is there's like 100 different ways to kind of approach doing this. You can kind of, like right now, I'm just going for just really laying it down very subtly. There have been times that I've done this where I've actually just scrubbed it down and gone for some real linear strokes, kind of closer to like a Drew Struzan approach. But this, I like the subtlety that it has, so I'm gonna I'm going to constantly do stuff to sort of really get back to that subtlety. And again, the really cool thing about this is what it does is it really makes the it really enhances the texture of the paper. So in a sense, just using, again, I'm going to bring in a slightly darker green here, and what I'll do is I'll use that to darken things up a bit. And as I'm doing this with almost no pressure on the pencil whatsoever. I'm just getting a little bit of greens on the little tips of the paper, the mountains there. And
Did you have sharpen?
no, I was just making sure. And this, my studio mate Hoyt will tell you that this is one of my favorite pencils here. In fact, I've worn it down to nothing. I've got another one in reserve, but this is like the emerald, spice of like pencils. This is the 995. It's, I mean, if every Prismacolor was as good as this 995, I'd be using Prismacolor for everything.
So tell them why, when you start to get a tool that you really like, you have to hoard them.
Oh my God! I mean, there's way too many times where you find just the right tool, just the right material that you want, and then you go to the art supply store and they don't have it, or even worse, a company that's like very cheap will actually like buy that company and then put it out of business. So a lot of times when I find something that I think, oh man, this is the ultimate tool, I will just go into the art supply store and buy all of it. So yeah, the 995, I cannot recommend any Prismacolor more than the, sort of lovely 995. And again, because it's it's a dark but very rich violet, I'm gonna come in here into these green areas with it. You'll notice I'm kind of not really getting in there and scrubbing it down. What I'm doing is I'm kind of holding it down really flat. Because I'm holding it down flat, it's again really picking up the texture of the paper rather than looking like a pencil. And the good buddy of the 995 is the sort of the 994, which is basically a lot like the 995, but with a little bit more intensity. What's really cool is I can use the 995 anywhere, but the 994, I've got to be very careful with it because it's almost a pure violet. So, it's got a real nice kind of magenta intensity to it. So what I'll do with the 994 is I'll just kind of put it on those slight edges that I want to really enhance something a little bit.
So Brian, Dallas Holiday is asking for you to repeat this art book from Stuart Ing.
The art book from Stuart Ing is it's the David Grove book. David Grove is an absolutely incredible illustrator. He's one of the guys that pioneered this technique and just made it incredibly popular. And really, David Grove is a wonderful illustrator, wonderful designer, wonderful photographer. So really, I definitely advise just doing a web search on David Grove. And at the same time, Stuart Ing has a fantastic David Grove book where you can really see what a master does with this technique. All right, and now I'm going in with an orange, and what I'll do is, again, I'm going to heat up the edges of these leaves just a little bit more. Heat up the edges of those shadows right before you get into the flesh tone itself. And what's cool is I can even go into these greens if I lay the pencil down and not go for like something that's just obviously like a pencil line, but go for something a little bit more subtle. And when you look at this, you're actually seeing not only the green, but you're seeing the combination of the green and the orange laying right next to each other. So you have this rich green, rich orange kind of blending together, but not blending together at the same time. And what I'll do is I'll take some even darker orange, and this orange is really well within my color theory. So I'm going to take this this darker orange, and I'm going to go in here and just add a little, where this stuff gets a little too brown out here, I'm going to add a little bit of life to it. And even as we go up in here, like if I use that bright orange in there, it's going to call attention to itself, but I can use some of that this dark orange, just really add a little extra there. And that's kind of working out for me so far. So what I'm going to do is bring up the side of the face here. This edge of the face, I think, needs to be brought out a little bit. And again, I get that full range of reds and oranges here. So this is like a Prismacolor, really, you know, right next to a flesh tone. And this, because this is like the true color here, I can actually go a little bit lighter with this. But as I go away from the light, I want to lay the pencil down. But again, what I'm getting is those really nice sort of subtle moves where it's going from this green into this flesh tone into this orange. And this is where really kind of paying attention to your anatomy really helps you out, where you kind of really know exactly how the face is going to turn. I'm going to kind of bring out the ridge of that lift there. And I'm going to get in here a little bit. And, you know, while I'm doing this stuff, I am just, if I don't know what I'm doing, if I have any question whatsoever, I'm not going to kind of try to bull my way through it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to reference like instantaneously. If I have anything that even resembles a question, I'm going to go to reference on it.
So explain why.
Well, because if I don't know it, I'm not going to make it up. If I make it up, then it's obvious that I don't know it. So,
yeah, but people don't believe you don't know it. I mean, that's the one I'm saying is, you know, like we've had this conversation before where people walk up to the table and they're like, "How much reference do you use?" And you're like, "Oh, I use reference for everything," and they're like, "Really?" So
yeah, that's the thing is even it's kind of funny because even when I'm not using reference, I'm using reference. You know, I'm using something that I've already seen before, some way, somehow.
So, and for those of you that have joined us, this was the model originally on that Brian was using.
Yep, that is the lovely June. She's been my model, you know, for the last few. When I say few, I mean like 20 years.
I was going to say more than a few, whatever you're going to say, a few decades.
Yeah. And again, I want to kind of come in there and get kind of a little bit more of a rose on the lips than my original washes kind of gave to me. So I'm gonna kind of go in and add a little something to that. And again, what I want to do is I want to start it off too light and work my way up to it rather than just assuming that I can get the perfect color in one shot. Yeah, but it is kind of funny. A lot of artists have this thing where they take some sort of bizarre pride in not using reference, like that's something really cool, like that makes them awesome if they're not using reference. And I got to tell you, man, I am not that guy. I am just super quick at if I have any question whatsoever, if I don't know what I'm doing, I am onto the reference instantaneously. So rather than taking any pride in not using reference, I take pride in using reference. Are we up and going?
Actually, we were Facebook's working. Twitter seems to be down, so I can't find any questions there. And then the Yahoo group still actively going.
Sweet. And one of the things that you're going to see me doing on this constantly is anytime I have like a dark area meeting a light area, a lot of times what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over that area with just a little bit of a lighter color or a richer color, because I want to a certain extent reduce the contrast, but also it's a good thing to kind of boost up that edge a little bit. And what I want to do here is on the teeth, I'm going to lay down just a little tiny bit of green first, and that's mainly because I want like a little bit of cool there before I lay down my lighter value. Again, with my lighter value, I'm not going to do all the teeth with my lighter value. I'm just going to do just the ones that are over here actually moving into the light. And that's kind of the only thing that's really necessary to kind of bring that out.
So Anna says this is her favorite thing that you do. You really hit those shadows with color. It creates so much energy and visual candy. Man, gotta love it.
Sweet.
See, it's cool when people watching can still even though I know we don't have the zoom lens on the live feed. The live feed's showing you more process, but hopefully the close-up images are giving you more of the detail.
And I mean, I'm gonna kind of get in here a little bit so you can kind
That's
of
probably good. Right
have
there.
a good idea of about what's going on. Again, a lot of the color that you're seeing is just random color that the technique throws in there. Stuff that I'm not necessarily in control of.
So a latecomer wanted to know whose voice was whose. I think it should be obvious. The more mellow, tranquil voice is Brian's, and the deeper, frantic voice is Robert's.
Yeah.
And then Michelle is in the corner, so you'll hear her occasionally, just yell over here at us.
Well, clearly I'm Brian.
And at this stage, I'm just kind of going through and hitting those areas, kind of boosting up the or lowering the contrast, looking at the areas where I feel that I need a little bit of chroma, and areas that I need a little bit of enhancement. Like to me, when I look at this, I can kind of go, okay, well, that brow up here, that's a little bit too green. That doesn't look like a transition into flesh tone. So what I'm going to do is I'll I'll add a little bit of orange to that, just to make that transition feel a little better. And in fact, I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of that lighter orange. And again, I'm laying the pencil down. I'm not working on the very tip of the pencil because what I want to do is I want to really get the texture of that board doing a lot of my work. I don't want it to look like I sat here and drew all this stuff. I want it to look like it's just kind of a part of the texture of the board.
Yeah, and again, as we talked about with the leaf, now that you get into the face, the texture of the board is really coming through and actually gives a whole nother dimension to the skin tone.
Yeah, and again, you know, I'm going to kind of go through and look at those areas where I need to sort of boost up the tones a little bit more. I'm kind of really paying careful attention to the anatomy here. All right.
Okay, no, it's not moving. It's down.
All right. Hey, it looks like the sound is back,
Sounds back,
but the video is
but the
not.
video is not.
You all have to learn by sound now.
Yeah. If you're actually listening to this, I'll actually try not to do any more work until we get the video back. And let's see. Yeah, for some reason, that video is not coming back at all. Okay, how about this? Let's try this. Switch it over. And then let's
Switch it back.
switch it back.
Oh, you are a
Aha!
smart man. Okay, so give everybody a chance to get back on again.
Okay. YouTube, you cannot defeat me. Oh, thanks, man. I'm actually going to get it in this hand, so.
Okay, so we're waiting for everyone to come back up for a minute. So just a reminder, we're posting close-up pictures on the Facebook page. You can send us a message via the Yahoo group or the Facebook page, comments or questions. Brian's talking process throughout the whole thing. We've been at this for about 2 hours and 20 minutes now, I think. So you can tell the piece is definitely coming in very nicely. All right, we should be good now.
All right, now I'm gonna actually add a little green to this eye over here. But the eye over here is not very important, so I'm not gonna really do too much work on it. Gonna add a little bit of color to it. Boost up the contrast just a little bit more, but that's not the important eye, so so I'm not gonna really do a whole lot of work in that direction. over here, this is the important eye. So what I want to do is, and again, another thing that I try to do is I try to save my subject for last. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to balance the subject against everything else that's there. If I jump in too early and do my subject, and then I go to a different area and work on that other area might end up being like a lot more intense than my subject. But if I work everything that I'm going to work first, and then when I'm done with everything else, I go to my subject, I can really sort of monitor how intense everything else is compared to my subject and treat my subject appropriately.
So I want you to know, while we were down, Anna ran over, tossed ribs into the oven. So she says, now we have to do a second one because
oh man, she's got ribs
if
going.
she's eating ribs in the middle of the night, she needs some art. Because for those of you that just joined us, Anna's in Germany, so it's like probably 1 o'clock European time right now. And then I don't know what time is it in Australia, Connie. You'll have to post that up for us.
Yeah, it's pretty early in the morning there.
Wait, I got it on my clock. I can tell you.
Hey, look at that.
You don't actually have to know anything.
Okay, according to the world clock, we are at 1:52 in Berlin, so it's almost 2. And then Connie is 11:22 a.m., so it's midday tomorrow.
Yeah. All right, and now what I'm doing is I'm going to add like just a little bit of enhancements to these leaves up here. Just a little something to kind of pull the edges out a little bit. You know, and a lot of this work I'm doing with laying the pencil down and not bothering to like, you know, get in and do any details. And something else you'll notice is that I'm working over here. I'm not really bothering with this stuff up here. This stuff up here is just sort of off my radar. What I want to do is I want this stuff down here. This area over here is the area that I think is most important. So that's the area that I'm going to work on. That's the area that I'm going to boost up. Those are the areas that I'm going to add like really nice enhancements to.
So everyone's grateful that you demonstrated this technique because a couple have said they've tried it in art school and they've seen you do it and they're happy to hear you walk through the steps and discuss it. So.
Totally cool. But it's you know, really one of my favorite techniques. I think it's just a really fun technique. But the sad thing is, it's not only a fun technique, it's an egregiously like annoying technique. And a lot of times, if you don't have the steps right, this technique will just bite you. So it's a really good idea to kind of, and because there's not a whole lot of people doing it right now, it's a difficult technique to actually catch someone doing it and be able to kind of experience it for yourself. In fact, one of the students that I worked with, in fact, he was a student at the time. He's a fantastic illustrator now. He was in school, and they were showing him this technique while he was in school, and he was like an assistant at the time, and he came from school and he said, yeah, we're gonna be playing with this technique. And you know, they were referring to it as the Thomas Paine technique, because Thomas Paine did something very similar as far as the technique is concerned. And he told me the steps that he was supposed to take to do the technique, and they had the steps completely wrong. You know, so this was an art school saying, yes, you know, so you will learn the Thomas Paine technique, but what they were teaching him wasn't the Thomas Paine technique. Yeah, and not only was it not the Thomas Paine technique, the technique that they were teaching simply didn't work because the steps were mixed up. You know, it's kind of like, oh, if you apply this and then this, the painting's going to explode. You know, it was techniques that just didn't work together at all. So so you know, I kind of said to him, well, you can't do this, and he was just like, yeah, but I'll get a failing grade if I deviate from the assignment. And I, after wrestling with him for a while, I finally kind of forced him to approach the technique in a different way, and he did, and it worked out great. You know, it just really worked out cool. He had a great piece from it, but then he went to school like the next week, and when he got to school the next week, everyone else that did the assignment screwed it up, but he was the one where his illustration worked.
Yeah.
You know, and the question was, well, what did everyone else do wrong? Well, everyone else listened to the instructor.
Yeah. It wasn't that they did it wrong. They just followed the instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Chose poorly.
Yes.
You chose poorly. And again, because I have this red as part of my color theory, I'm just not gonna hold back. I love when I get a nice rich red as part of my color theory. Again, what I'm doing is I'm kind of going in and heating up those edges a little bit, you know, putting a little bit of life in those leaves, you know, and what it does to me is it really brings out the transparency of flesh. I think anything that we can do as illustrators to sort of celebrate that transparency that real flesh has just makes the illustration kind of jump off the page even better. Like one of the things that I loved was watching the Incredibles. When I watched the Incredibles for the first time, they had done this thing where the flesh tones of the character really had like a lot of transparency, where the light was hitting their ear and really kind of coming through. And that's just, I mean, it just really just gave things a little bit of extra life. So I think as illustrators, when we can kind of do the same thing.
Well, the cool thing about the Incredibles was they chose to use light for different things, because when Bob was in his cubicle, you had that nasty fluorescent kind of like washed out gray light. And then when you got to their house, everything was kind of a little darker. They had like the lamp lights and stuff like that at dinner and in the living room. And then when you get to the island, it was just like beautiful sunlight reflected off water, reflected off leaves.
Yeah, it really. And I've brought June back into the game, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of using her to check my anatomy to make sure that I get these last little bits just right. And it's these little subtle turns on the face there. I want to really make sure I capture those right. And a lot of times, I mean, to me, the highlights that you pop on the nose, a lot of times those are what makes the face, is getting those right. And the nose itself gets really tricky. I mean, it's a very complex item, and it wants you to fail. So a lot of times, you know, you have to remember that, and you know, June, you know, because she's ultra blanc, she's just you know, just really white. It gives me the values of things, but I have to remember what happens not only with the value, but I have to remember what happens with the blood underneath the skin. And anytime the blood underneath the skin is forced up against bone or forced up against cartilage, the skin gets a little darker and more red in those areas. So the nose, like the cheeks, can be really red, but the nose, because you've got those vessels so close to the skin and you're looking through that transparency, the nose tends to be a little bit darker than the rest of the face. So even though I've got this up here with all these lighter values, the nose, which seems like I should just like, it's bending right into the light, and it seems like I should just go in there and just like lay down those light values and call it a day. I'm actually going to hold back a little bit on the lightest value, just so that the highlight on that nose kind of pops out a little stronger. But the nose always needs to remain a little bit lighter, or a little bit darker than the rest of the face. And again, with the help of June, I'm kind of going through and getting those subtle turns, you know, on the face. And if I've done everything well in the stages earlier, I really don't have to do much in this stage. You know, so I'm not having to force it. And again, down here on her chin, I don't want lighter values there because the light starts here and it diminishes as it goes down. So I'm just really kind of avoiding getting in there and putting any sort of extra attention there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in here, and with these leaves here, you saw when I was doing the wash, I jumped back in and put a little bit of green over here, even though most of this bottom half of the face, I blushed in some of that orange. Because I blushed in some of that orange, the green can't make its way up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with just a subtle green on the leaves up here. But I'm going to do it without like getting in there and carving it and trying to make it like too green. Okay, and now I think we've goofed around enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go for the subject of the piece now. So and the subject of the piece for what I'm doing here is going to be those eyes. So I'm pulling out my little tiny brush, and I mean this brush here is a sort of a Princeton brush. But like I said, I use the cheapest brushes in the world. I really can't say, hey man, you have to use this particular brush because it's just so sweet. And what I'm doing now is getting, you know, a little bit of titanium white ready. And so far, nothing on here is white. Everything has got like a little bit of that original, you know, burnt sienna, or a little bit of that original ultramarine in it. So so my illustration is all opaque colors that have a little tiny bit of those two initial warm and cool values in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually pulling out, you know, the heavy artillery. And what I'll do is I'll start things off with like a light wash. And what I want to do is I want to give some intensity to the eyes. And everything's going to be transparent just like everything else for the initial intensity of the eyes. So I'm kind of going in with, again, the same green gold that I used everywhere else. But this is kind of the setup color. So I'm washing in a little bit of that green gold so I can get more intense in that. Again, this color has, this green gold is a very transparent color. I mean, that green gold isn't going to cover anything. It's always going to be a little bit lighter than what's originally down there. No matter what you have down there, it's going to shine through this green gold. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little tiny bit of the phthalo on the light side of the eyes. And in fact, let me give that a little bit of time to dry before I go in with the opaques. But something to pay attention to when you're doing eyes is and it's just kind of a neat little trick. And what it does is it makes your eyes like it gives your eyes a little bit more life, makes them a little bit more intense. I mean, if you have like an eye. This is the old eyeball here, and this is what the concern is. If you have an eye, you know that you're going to have like the highlight in the eye, and you're going to have the shadow in the eye. What you want to think about is you want to think about the eye as if it's what really gives the eyes depth is if you think of the eye as if it's a bowl. So if I was drawing like just a bowl like this, if light was shining into that bowl, what would happen is this top part of the bowl would cast a shadow onto the bowl itself. And then the light part of the bowl, which is the part of the bowl that's across from the light, that's going to receive the light directly. So that's going to be a brighter part. So that's how we look at it from the side. If we looked at it from the front, you're talking about the light coming in from there. So it's casting a shadow on the bowl. So let's say the pupils here. What's going to happen is it's going to cast that shadow, onto the bowl of the eyes itself. And what you can do is make it a soft shadow, make it kind of fade a little bit. So you have that effect of dark going to light on the actual darkest part of the eye. But then the real enhancer comes, when you actually put the highlight in the eye. You're actually putting a highlight, right at the darkest part of the eye. So you're gonna pop that highlight right there in the eye, so that highlight really stands off of the eye. Just to make that a little darker, if you're doing the eye itself, you can see that because I've really kind of set things up so that the darkest part of the eye is a part of the eye that has a highlight. First of all, that highlight has something to sort of be highlighted off of, but it really gives that eye kind of a glassy kind of feeling.
So it gets a three-dimensional,
Yeah.
spherical sense
Aha, we're back.
Okay. So we didn't do anything. Brian was right at the pivotal point that he was going to make his point.
Yeah, right at the point. All right. So I've got the light coming in here, like we've discussed before. I've got my highlight facing the direction of the light. I've got the lightest part of the eye facing in the opposite direction. So it's light and light. So I always make sure that those are across from each other. In fact, just to kind of go into that in a little bit more detail, there's going to be occasions where you have someone, particularly people that are doing spooky or dramatic stuff. You might have an occasion where a character is uplit. So you've got this dramatic uplighting on them. And again, you're still going to have an eye, but that eye is going to be dramatically uplit. So the light's coming from here. So if the light's coming from there, the highlight, again, is going to face the light. So the highlight might be at the bottom of the eye. And if the highlight is at the bottom of the eye, then the darkest part of the eye is going to be on the bottom of the eye. And the lightest part of the eye is going to be at the top of the eye. And that's because you have the light coming from down here. And then, whatever other shading happens. But you can really see on that that it really sells that effect. And the lights, the eyes look really liquid. They look really sort of luminous because you actually have the highlight facing in the proper direction. In fact, this is one of the reasons why when someone's wearing sort of false contacts, when someone's wearing false contacts, what happens is the light comes in whatever direction that the light comes in at, but instead of it being this way, false contacts are this way. So what happens is the light hits and the highlight is actually at the same place where the eye is lightest. And then the eye gets darker as it falls into shadow on the bottom. That's one of the reasons why when someone wears false contacts, it doesn't look real. And that's because the light isn't going through the All right, look at that.
Sounds
Get
up,
this
but
down.
no video.
I need to turn this into a
A channel to where you can
a
just
thing to where it's just like boom, boom, boom.
keystrokes. Yeah.
We're gonna bring up the mini cam here for a second, and then we're gonna get rid of it. And we are totally back up and running. So back to where I was. If you're wearing false contacts, the light goes around the contacts, so it looks artificial. But if it's a person's real eyes, then the light goes through the eyes, and that's what gives it that luminous quality to it. Now, the other thing that I was just about to say, if you really want to then add like that extra level of enhancement to the eyes, understand that the eyes are actually rounded. So the eyes themselves, the actual whites of the eyes, are going to be darkest on the bottom. So one of the things that I always try to make it a point to do is near the bottom of the whites of the eyes, make it a little bit darker. So if you make the bottom of the whites of the eyes just a little bit darker, what ends up happening is the lightest part of the iris is standing on top of the darkest part of the whites of the eyes. So it really gives the eyes like a good bit of luminosity. And what's fun when you're doing that type of stuff is I mean, there are times when you see someone who has just blue eyes. And the reason why they have blue eyes is because the actual iris is a lighter value than the whites of their eyes.
Right.
So don't be afraid to take down, take the whites of the eyes down like a few value pegs. It could give you like a little bit more intensity with the iris of the eye. I mean, the whites of the eyes, that's really not that important. In fact, something that I try to play around with a lot of times is I don't kill myself making the whites of the eyes too much lighter than the flesh tone. So if I'm doing a person who's has darker skin, like a person who's black or Hispanic, I'll actually do the whites of their eyes darker. And because I'm doing the whites of their eyes darker, what ends up happening is it makes the iris of their eyes really kind of pop out just a little bit more. It gives it like a little bit more energy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of see if I can apply this here. I'm going to kind of go through and just go a little bit darker. Near the bottom of the eyes here. And it's not anything too dramatic or anything like that, but just a little something to sort of add a nice base for the eyes to stand on top of. And now we've been kind of like getting around the eyes as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same green gold, which is just a crazy intense green. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of my titanium white. So I want that green gold to have as much opacity as possible. And at first, I'm not going to go completely titanium white. What I'm going to go is I'm going to put like just a little bit of titanium white in with the green gold. And even at this stage, you'll see that it doesn't take much to just really take that value up a little bit. So I'm going to get in there and just that lower part of the eye, and I'll lighten that up just a little bit. And then you go for a stage more titanium white. Kind of get that in there. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is rather than actually go, and again, I don't have white anywhere else on this illustration. And my thought on this is that the light isn't actually white. The light has got a little bit of orange in it. The light is sort of it's not bright noonday sun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually mix the white with my vat orange. So the lightest white over here has like some of that vat orange in it. But even with that that vat orange in it, it still looks pretty white.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want the highlight in the eye to overshadow the actual iris of the eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just pure absolute titanium white, I'm gonna put like just a little bit of titanium white right there in the eyes, which is nice and bright, and it's doing me a good service. But that's actually going to be too bright, and what I'm doing now is I'm giving it just a little bit of time to dry out some, because I don't want it to actually be center stage. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go in here with a little bit of this, of course, my favorite 995. I'm going to go in with a little bit of 995 and make sure that the edge of that iris is nice and solid, well represented. Okay, and now that that titanium white is dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that green gold again. And this is green gold with absolutely no titanium white mixed into it. This is just pure green gold on its own. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze the green gold over the green gold with titanium white that I've laid down. So what that's going to do is that's going to give me a super intense green gold, which is going to be more intense than putting pure green gold down, because now the green gold is on top of white, whereas nothing else here is on top of white. So that's going to end up being like the brightest, richest color on the whole piece. So that color is going to have even more intensity than my, nearly pure white vat orange there. And just kind of like giving things a look. And I think I'll need just a little bit of enhancement on top of that eye, just a little bit to define that pupil. I'm going to bring this edge around here a little bit more. But I'm happy with that. So I think we are done on this one. And what I'll do is I'll kind of like probably spend like a few minutes looking at it, making sure we're good. But for the most part, I'm feeling pretty good. And the cool thing is this paper. I mean, you can tell that the paper was like buckled all crazy, but now that paper's like, kind of gone back to nearly flat. So like I said, it's the paper's like a real monster to work on, because it's doing its sort of buckling thing all over the place while you're working on it. But after you're finished doing the work, the paper goes back to a nice, comfortable, flat edge.
Sweet.
It's now for sale.
Listen to Michelle.
All right, so there it is. Let me give you kind of a closer look. And Robert's going to put up a more detailed sort of iPhone shot of this, so you can kind of see what happened with it. And also, what we'll do is we'll put a high-res scan of it up on the Yahoo group.
So again, not going to the Facebook page. That'll be on the Yahoo group. So
yeah. So
that
so
way nobody's stealing it and turning it into prints.
yeah. So if you want to see a more detailed group, detailed shot of this, go to the Yahoo page. Yeah. If you're not a part of the Yahoo page already, jump in there and join it. Yep, that's true. There's a few people still doing Yahoo.
Yes, we're one of the few.
All right. And what I'll do right now is actually, you know what? Because I just can't let it go. See, there's something that I'm kind of catching here that I
will feel bad if I don't do it.
Right on this. Oh, sorry about that. Right on this pupil, I'm going to go right around the darkest part of this pupil with a little bit of red orange. Okay, I can live with that. So now we're done.
Now we're done.
What we'll do is we'll take a bit of a break, sort of regroup, stretch a little bit, and I think we've got enough energy to do one more of these before we call it a night. But this is a really fun technique. I'm hoping that you guys really enjoyed kind of how things went. It's a technique that I will continue to play with. It's a technique that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to master, and it's going to spend the rest of its life trying to kick my butt. So that's kind of how it goes. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll do one more of these and call it a night, but we're just having fun at the studio. All right, you guys take it as easy as you possibly can, and thanks. Oh yeah.